Sledgehammer Horror Guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined once again by a very good friend of mine. He is in the upcoming Christmas slasher, the upcoming On Location, and getting ready to film in the upcoming Time's Up with our friend Piney himself, my friend Steve Nelson. Steve, how you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing so good. I'm glad you had me back. Talking about such a fun franchise.
Yes.
That your channel is blowing up. It seems like you're getting a lot of subscribers. And dude, sweet shirt, man.
Yes. Big fan of Time's Up already, man. I can't wait for this to come out. This is something I'm very, very excited about. So one of those things that I can't talk too much about it, but from what I know, this is going to blow people away. 5, 4, 3, 2, done. I am so excited about it. I'm glad you're a part of it. I'm glad I can promote it. You're also in the upcoming season's film as well. Producer, or are you actually in that film?
Yeah, so I'm a producer, and I'll be getting killed off in seasons. One of my goals next year, besides producing as many movies as I can, is to die in as many horror movies as I can. I'm filming a scene in Time's Up next week. I'm not dying, unfortunately,
Right.
but it'll still be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then Time's Up, and then On Location is in post production. That's looking really good. I got that shirt right here.
Yes, sir.
On Location. So yeah, it's an action-packed year, and I'm really excited about it.
Dude, I'm very excited for you. No one deserves this as much as you, man. So I'm so happy that this is happening for you. I'm so honored. I'm honored that I can have you back as a guest, man. This is so cool. I love the communication that we have. So for those of you that don't know, if you didn't read the title, me and Steve are going to be ranking the Tremors franchise from least favorite to favorite. If you've seen Tremors 1, you know that something they always do is rock, paper, scissors. So Steve and I decided that we are going to have a fun game of rock, paper, scissors, best of one, for who's going to go first throughout our discussion. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, shoot. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds perfect.
All right. 1, 2, 3, shoot.
Scissors.
Oh, you got me. All right. So you will be going first. So coming in at number 7 on your ranking would be.
This is a tough call because I find most of the movies pretty fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to pick something, so I'm going with Tremors: A Cold Day in Hell.
Okay. So that would be Tremors 6.
Yeah.
A Cold Day in Hell. So your positives and negatives about the movie a little bit.
Yeah, later on in the franchise, I think like 5, 6, and 7, they'll kind of share a similar feel. And they're fun. They just seem a little generic. Like they don't seem as tremory as the first Tremors. They seem kind of more generic action movies, explosions, cars flipping, Jamie Kennedy being annoying. There is a lot to like. Michael Gross.
Way too much slow motion.
Yeah, they had to have that runtime, man.
Yeah.
It's still fun. Michael Gross, he carries the franchise, and you know what? I think it's time that we recognized him as big of a monster hunter horror hero as Ash, as Ripley. He's been doing it for 30 years, hunting graboids.
Right. And it's funny you say that because my least favorite one is for almost the same reason as you, but just a little bit different. I actually went with 4, The Legend Begins.
Okay.
Reason why, to me, this is the only one that I struggled to get through. I'm with you. When I think of Tremors, I don't think of an overly horror movie. I don't think of an overly comedic movie. I just think of an entertaining franchise. And this is the only one to me that just was too slow of a burn for me. And, for those of you that don't know, and I want to say this again, I should have said this at the beginning, but there are spoilers aplenty. We are going to have spoilers in this. But this one to me is just so slow. And we see Michael Gross return, but this time it's Hiram Gummer. And he's like this pacifist that has nothing to do with guns. He's a real pushover, which is so far away. And they're in rejection, not perfection. And it's not quite perfection yet. And then the comedy doesn't land much in this movie. The best part of this movie, honestly, was Black Hand Kelly. I think Black Hand Kelly is pretty cool. But to me, this one was the one that just really went the slowest for me. So coming in at number 7 for me would actually be Tremors 4, The Legend Begins.
Okay. Well, I would like to say early on, as we're going through this franchise, they do a pretty decent job of like maintaining continuity and characters. They're constantly referencing Val and Earl and Jody and Chang and all the old characters. And it's really refreshing, and it makes it feel like there's kind of a clear vision for the franchise, even though they're mostly making it up as they go along. But it feels kind of like Child's Play, where it's like you have these recurring characters, or like they always remember the past, essentially. And that's just cool to see in a horror franchise. You know, growing up with Friday the 13th, there's not much continuity, so I appreciate it here.
Well, and when you're talking about that, that is the one positive. Another positive I want to say about The Legend Begins. When you hear that Tremors is doing a prequel, you're like, how can you do a prequel when in Tremors 1, they talk about how nothing like this has ever happened. So I do like in The Legend Begins how they tie it together to make sure that nobody knows that this ever happened. So that is a kudos I can give to them for that movie. I always try to find the positives, even in the worst. And when I say the worst of the franchise, Tremors 4 is the worst in the franchise to me, but this to me is a very fun film franchise. So it's still one that I would watch if it was on.
Yeah, perfect.
Let's dive into your number 6. What comes at number 6 for you?
Yeah, so I was kind of saying that later in the franchise, 5, 6, and 7 all share a very similar feel, similar budget. And this is where it's mostly CG at this point. There's barely any practical monster effects. So I'm just going to have to go with Tremors 5, Bloodlines. That was kind of like, their big comeback after 4. They had Jamie Kennedy. It was Burt Gummer in Africa. Like, that was the big thing. And, it's fine. I just like the character, really. Michael Gross just carries it for me, man. Burt,
he does. He
just has so many great lines. He's so just like funny, and you want to root for him. The script just feels so clunky. Like, they have ideas, like they want to set up stuff to come back later in the movie. They have little twists and turns. Oh, Jamie Kennedy's your son. But literally from like the opening scene, you're like, oh, Jamie Kennedy's his son. Got it.
Right. And I totally agree. Me and you, I don't think we feel the same, because I like the injection of Jamie Kennedy. I can't see how it's Jamie Kennedy. So he's obviously over the top a lot. But I do like the injection of him into the franchise, bringing a big name in to maybe bring in some people that didn't recognize it earlier on. They weren't as old as you and I. You and I are the old men here in the scene now. So, maybe get some of the younger kids in. So I can appreciate it, but I do understand where you're coming from too. Every time he's on the screen, I'm waiting for I say Melly, you say boo, Melly, boo. Like, I'm waiting for every time I see him, man.
He has a couple funny lines, and you do kind of end up liking him. He does have a few moments where he's a hero. But like, there's certain, like, the formula of Tremors ever since the first one, they just have to have like a sidekick. They've got to have a love interest. Like, they do that in every movie to diminishing returns, I feel. You can't replace Kevin Bacon. Once he left, it left a huge void in the franchise, which I don't feel like it ever fully, replaced Kevin Bacon.
They always tried. You're right. And once we get to the, other ones, we'll talk about it more, but they always try to inject that new sidekick. And this one was the Jamie Kennedy one. So this was the first appearance of Jamie Kennedy in Tremors 5.
It just felt like 10 years too late. Like, Jamie Kennedy's playing this like extreme sports dude bro, and he's acting like he's like 28, but in reality, I think he's in his 40s. And I'm like, what?
You're right. And I think the reason I got a soft spot, he reminds me of my uncle in this movie, which is totally why I have a soft spot for him in that one.
But, I am complaining a lot, but I will say it's still enjoyable. I like the change of setting. Something I will say is they always do something new and different with the monster, with the graboids. They're always adding to the lore, and it never conflicts. Like, I don't think they ever come up with a rule that, that breaks another rule. So with like this one, Bloodlines, now they're in Africa, so it's a different evolutionary chain of graboids. So they don't have the shriekers; they go straight to ass blasters. The little tongues come out, and they're on their own. So they come up with cool ideas throughout, keep it fresh.
And I agree with that. And I'll get more on that when I get to number 5.
Sure.
But before we get there, I got to tell you what's at my number 6. And my number 6 is actually your number 7, Tremors 6, A Cold Day in Hell. I do think that a lot of the side cast in this one was fun. You could have done more with the Canadian location. Like, I feel like even though you were in Canada and it was in the ice, a lot of it still feels like your regular Tremors. You're still in perfection. So they could have capitalized more, I feel, on that location. Bert in this movie
literally say like, oh, sorry. They even literally say like, oh, it's a box canyon. And Bert says something like, oh, I've been there before.
Yep. Yep. And that's Bert in this movie really shows. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Jamie Kennedy has to crawl into the graboid, when they capture the graboid alive. Yeah. And he has to crawl inside the graboid and take the syringe in there to get because Bert was poisoned by a graboid. He was infected when he was swallowed in a previous film, which we'll talk about as well. But Jamie Kennedy is inside there, and Bert, he comes out and he's shooting stuff. He's like, rookies. And he falls down because that's how sick he is. Yeah. I do like that scene a lot. Another thing I want to talk about with this movie, Tremors 1 to me, and my good friends, the horror show on YouTube, feel the same way as I do. They have always called the first one Land Jaws. And that's what it was. Jaws and Tremors. Like, you got the land jaws, you got the sea tremors. And in this one, there is the scene where there's something in the water. And it is almost like a Tremors Jaws scene where you see the lady getting tossed about in the water. And it almost feels Jaws-esque to me. And that's something that I think that might have catapulted this up a little bit on the list just because of that. So that to me was my number 6, was A Cold Day in Hell. So how about
Oh, well, I just wanted to say you're totally onto something with the Jaws reference, because throughout the franchise, they are constantly making references to Predator, Jurassic Park, other franchises where you can tell they're kind of cribbing ideas. And but yeah, I liked that, that Jamie Kennedy getting into the worm, and it was cool. How did you feel about them? I think they used Africa as the Arctic. I think they just filmed in the same area that they did.
Yeah, and that to me is like when I heard, I'm not one of those people that are totally against the changing of location. Like, there's a lot of people that were like, oh, Jason and Leprechaun in space, or Tremors on ice, or I love the idea of taking the same thing you're doing and taking it to a new location to keep it fresh. And that's something you had touched on earlier. That's something Tremors nails, is keeping the locations fresh. Every movie you're entertained for a different reason. It's not like there's a guy killing campers in the woods in a different way. It is a graboid eating people in different ways, but there's always a new evolution or a new location, something to really keep it fresh and keep it on its toes. And that's the one bummer about this movie.
Gross.
Yes.
New location, yes. Same Michael Gross.
That's a badass t-shirt.
We'll make that. We gotta start selling t-shirts.
Yeah, there you go. Put the TM on there, though. We can only sell them on April 13th, Michael Gross Day.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Pay your taxes.
Pay your taxes. While we're on that subject, what would be your number 5, my friend?
So, sticking to what I feel like is a trilogy, I'm going to go with Tremors Shrieker Island. Brand new one. It's on Netflix. So we did say spoilers. So this is your last warning.
We did say spoilers. If you have not seen it, pause this, go watch Shrieker Island, and come back to hear Steve talk about this, because this is huge.
So yeah, they kill Bert. They kill Bert at the end. And you know what? I cried. I cried because it's been 30 years. It's been 7 movies. I love the guy. And to see him go out, middle finger raised, saving Napoleon Dynamite, that was pretty nice, man. The only downside to that was I wish it was Jamie Kennedy, actually. Instead of John Heater. They kind of just hand wave, Jamie Kennedy maybe is, filming some other movie, but they're like, he's in prison for drugs. Yeah. They just replace him. And it's like, you can tell they wanted to have him there for that final moment. That's the only thing. But I thought that was bold, and it caught me off guard.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. I never expected that. While we're talking about that, my number 5, Shrieker Island, Tremor 7. We're totally in agreement here.
That's convenient.
So maybe it's because it's so new, that's why it's a little bit higher for me. But you got a bunch of big game hunters that take shriekers out to an island to hunt shriekers and graboids. I didn't hate John Heater in it as much as everybody else that I've talked to did. I agree. It is hard to separate John Heater from Napoleon Dynamite. It is very hard. But I mean, the guy's trying, man. Like,
Yeah.
and this is a movie where he really gives it his all. It's a middle of the road type of movie to me. Very entertaining. We were talking about slow motion a little bit ago. This one goes way over the top with the slow motion, but I do love, look, I'm with you and I'm dead serious. My wife will attest to this. I cried as well when Bert died. It's a piece of me that's been, I'm 34, man. This movie's been with me since I was a little boy. So
I feel like we got to hug it out, man.
Yeah, I'm here.
I got
it, buddy.
Bert.
But it's, like you said, he's jumping through the air and he pushes John Heater out of the way, middle finger raised. Graboid eats him, goes through the ground, lands on the spikes and explodes. What a perfect send-off for Bert. And then you got the people at the end and they put the cross in and they put the Cubs hat on top of the cross.
I don't know about you.
Perfect memorial for Bert Gummer.
There's
no way.
Waiting for him to like climb up from a cliff and be like, I'm okay, guys.
Yep.
It just cuts. It cuts the credits and there's a montage of all the Bert moments from the franchise. And you're like, oh, fuck, he's dead.
Right. And what's even crazier about that whole scene is once it happens, the first thing that I think of is Tremors. When he's on the rock and he's like, if it comes to survival, I'm just going to walk out there with one of these bombs, let it swallow me and blow it up. And sure enough, at the end, the way he dies is the graboid swallows him and then blows up, So it's almost like he predicted in a way his death in Tremors.
Yeah.
And
that's the way Val and Earl killed the boss graboid in the first one.
Yeah.
And so to bring it back full circle, that was really smart.
It really was.
Yeah. It does help make the whole franchise feel more cohesive. But yeah, other than the ending, I did have fun with this one. I like the kind of most dangerous game, Jurassic Park sort of setup. Was pretty cool, I thought. But you can tell like there's only so much they can do with their budget. There's only so much new stuff they can add. So a lot of the movies end up feeling very similar, where it's like group of people stuck in one location. And I get it. There's a formula, and they don't have all in the world.
So that is our number 5, which is funny for it being the same one. But I can tell you our number 4 is not the same one. What came in at number 4 for you?
So I'm going to have to go with the last of what I consider the original trilogy, which is Tremors 3, Back to Perfection.
Nice.
Yeah, when I first saw this movie when I was younger, I hated it. I thought I could tell the budget was low. I could tell the effects weren't as good. Ass blasters, I thought, were kind of silly. But, watching it again in retrospect, maybe I've lightened up over the years. But, man, I can't think of any other word for this franchise than fun. Like, I can't say any of them are bad. Like, and the third one, introducing the ass blasters, that's new. And what I really like, this is what won me over, is they brought back so many characters from the original.
Oh, yes.
And at least 4 or 5, like the whole town's back outside of like Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. And that helped me a lot. Just kind of like, oh yeah, these characters. Oh, I love this person, And it was sad to see when they would die,
Yeah, and it's not just the same characters. It's the same actors that had played those characters too, which makes it more genuine. They didn't try to do any actor replacement. They brought back the same actors from the first one to reprise their role. And I agree with you. That was fucking awesome. Seeing like Mindy and Melvin and just watching these characters, it was a lot of fun to see that one.
And, once again, another Jurassic Park reference. They, constantly referencing that movie. And I think for a reason with the actress from
Mindy.
Jurassic Park when she was a younger girl. And now here she is, I think maybe late teens, early 20s. But so that was cool to see her again, because I think most people only know her from Jurassic Park and what was the other one she was in? I forget.
I know she was in the first Tremors. She was in Jurassic Park. She had a little.
I'll have to IMDb that later.
Yeah, me too. So your number 4 is Tremors 3. My number 4 is Tremors 5, Bloodlines. That's how I knew ours weren't the same. Intro Jamie Kennedy, and like I said, I don't hate that. The fact that it's in Africa, another thing, I love how they try to change the location of it. And I do like how you were talking about. In this one, we see that the tentacles actually can detach from the graboid and come out. I thought that was a really cool addition. Like you said, they're always trying to add that new addition.
Yeah.
What I don't like is the fact that they retconned the first one, how they were the first graboids of all time. You know, they say that in Africa, they've known about it for a long time. They do the dances to keep them away. It's just weird to me that they were able to confine that to just Africa, you know, and the ass blasters have been there for so long.
It
The
well, the backstory is a little confusing because in one they never explain anything, which I like a lot.
Mhm.
And then the second one they start giving you answers, and that's when they start saying, I believe, like, oh, we found a fossil. They're Precambrian. They're before dinosaurs. Um, and then yeah, but there's certain different evolutionary branches where there's some
Right.
in Africa. There's different ones in like America. Now there's some in the Arctic. Um, so yeah, it's a little confusing because it's like
Right.
the eggs apparently don't hatch for like 300 years, and it's
Right.
kind of like, why did no one discover these before? Like, and once you see later on, like when they keep adding stuff and the shriekers and the ass blasters, and they reproduce so quickly, and it's
Mhm.
just kind of hard to believe that, like, well, wouldn't they be the dominant species on Earth?
That's what I was thinking. They should be ruling this shit.
Right? I want to see that movie.
While we're talking about them ruling, the graboid you see in this one, like the queen graboid, is she jumps. She doesn't just come out of the
Yeah.
ground, jumps out of the ground. And this thing is scary as hell because you can't just hide out on a rock anymore. Like this thing jumps up, takes people. What I do like is how in this one it's almost a, I'm trying to think of the best way to word it. Like the mother bond in this one, how they come after the egg to try to save the egg. You know, like I really love that.
Part 3.
Yes. And there is even a scene where they're in the kitchen hiding from the ass blaster. And it's totally like the scene in
Yeah.
Jurassic Park with the
Same shot of like the claw coming in.
yes, all it's so great. And that's the first thing you think of when you see that part too. And then the coolest graboid kill ever. They referenced it at the beginning. This little girl is taking a battery and she's using jumper cables to get worms to come out of the ground for bait, which gives Bert the idea, because he's the ultimate badass, of trapping this giant graboid in and electrocuting the ground so it has to jump up so they can shoot it. So once it jumps up and they start shooting it, they're shooting it, shooting bow and arrows at it, and then the lightning comes and strikes it, and it just blows up. And I that's one of my favorite graboid kills in the whole franchise. So I love that scene. Coming in at number 4 for me would be Tremors 5: Bloodlines. How about number 3 for you?
So I think you're going to start to realize there's at least one shocking ranking on my list. Number 3 for me is Tremors 2: Aftershocks.
Oh, okay.
Which, you know what? I think in terms of sequels, it might be the one that most feels like the original. Maybe it's because Fred Ward's in there. Maybe it's just like the deserty setting. But it still kind of has that tactile feel. They do start introducing CG a little, but it's mostly practical. But I just like I like the premise. You know, hunting graboids. I just like all the references to the original. You know, they try to replace Kevin Bacon again with the cabbie, Grady, who
Grady.
is not nearly as charming. Maybe if it was Kevin Bacon, I would like him, but
And something else we should have said at the beginning, we are not going to have the Tremors TV show as part of this. You know, that's not something that we can rank along with the movies, I feel. Even the Kevin Bacon one that never got shown, which is something I hope comes to Earth one day, because I would love to see him reprise his role as Val. But man, that is ballsy having Tremors 2 at number 3.
Yeah. I have mostly positive reactions to it. I did feel like they kind of nerfed the graboids. It almost felt like Aliens, where they became too easy to kill. In the first one, they very clearly tell you, like, oh, they're learning. You can't keep doing the same trick. And in this one, the first half of the movie is the same trick over and over and over. They just keep driving this RC truck. You just keep seeing explosions in the ground. It's kind of boring, actually. But it really livens up with the Shriekers. Once they introduce that, really wins me over. And yeah, there's some good set pieces. It opens with the guy on like the oil barrels.
Yeah,
Um,
crawling down the oil barrel.
yeah, and the whole ending with like the warehouse. I mean, there's just some cool set pieces. A little more action than the first one. There's a lot of just really funny moments.
Yeah.
Bert has a giant graboid head on his wall, which I thought
Yeah,
was hilarious.
mounted.
And I think ultimately that's why it's number 3 instead of lower. Is it's really funny. It has the sharpness and the wit of the original, which they lose that as the movies go on.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like stuff they set up that pays off later, and callbacks, and just like very smart writing. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, same. And which brings us to my number 3, which I would like to think is also ballsy because I have Tremors 2 Aftershocks at number 3. And it's funny to say that because this takes place 6 years after the first one. Fred, obviously, Fred Ward reprises his role. Grady I feel the same way as you. He's a comedic addition, but he's not a great addition to the franchise. Obviously, why he's a one-off character in there. Earl decides to go hunt graboids because they're offering him $50,000 a piece for every dead graboid. But like you said, they learn from their mistakes. And in this one, there's so many: drive RC car, blow them up, celebrate, use an umbrella. Now they're offered $100,000 to capture a live one in this film. And Bert's like, fuck you, no way. It's not possible. Well, they hear one, they go after it. It's just laying there crying. And they're like, wow, this is how we can get $100,000, which really doesn't make sense because for every $50,000 they get for a dead one, they've already killed 20 of them. So this $100,000 shouldn't be that big of a deal to them. But they decide, then they come the next morning, they've been waiting, they hear it screaming. It's all torn apart. They're like, something ate it, don't know how. This is where we get the very first Shrieker scene.
Yeah.
And just watching, Bert's face when he sees the Shrieker, like, what the hell is this thing? And this is where we learn the Shriekers don't hunt you by sound, they hunt you by heat, which comes in handy at the end. Now, one of the funniest scenes from this movie is when Earl is not Bert. When Bert, he puts the explosives in, and he tells them, this is going to be a big explosion. So they run about 20 feet, and he's running. He's like, "What are you guys doing? We got to go." The explosion at the end is such a good scene. I absolutely adore that scene at the end.
Get down, stay down, cover your ears. Oh. It's gonna be big. Is it gonna be today? Brady, get your ass down.
And I think this has the best ending of all the films with that big explosion and watching everything blow up. I thought that was a really good ending to this film. So number 3 for me, also Tremors 2 Aftershocks.
Earl gets his centerfold.
Yeah, and it is. Yes, that's right. She is the centerfold. Which brings us to our number 2. Your number 2 would be.
So, in a shocking twist, it is your number 7. Tremors 4, The Legend Begins.
Yeah, we definitely had a different opinion on this one.
Now, I've always liked this one a lot. And I think because they strip away a lot of the excessive stuff they started adding in 2 and 3. It kind of goes back to a more like to basics approach. You've just got like a group of characters in rejection instead of perfection. Fighting off, I think 3 graboids. And so it does definitely, like, they're trying to, make it similar to the original. And I think they mostly pulled it off. The attacks in this movie are actually like really like well done and kind of scary. Like, like when people are being attacked, you're like, oh. Whereas in the other movies, they kind of might treat it as a comedic effect or for action. Right. And in this one, it's like, oh no, these things will mess you up. I like how they introduced the baby graboids, little graboids that jump through the air and topple you over. And they show you the eggs, that they because of the mine the water coming from the mine warms up the eggs and they hatch. So I thought that was cool. Like they finally have a reason that the graboids are here. Usually they're just there, but here it's like, oh, they accidentally hatched the eggs. Oh, that's cool. I loved Michael Gross playing against type, playing the opposite of Bert. But what it was cool that because it's a prequel, they show you because of the gunslinger.
That's how
his family lineage becomes all about survival and preparing and having guns. And then the redhead that he's into, which is a callback to the redhead from the original, I think.
Reba McEntire.
Reba, which I'm sad, by the way. Like Bert to his end, Mister
wanted her back, man.
He wanted her back
about Heather
for 30 years. And also his guns. He wanted his guns back.
Right. That's true love. Not Heather, the guns.
Yeah, but in this case, she owns a hotel. It's like a Wild West. It's a prequel, and she collects guns when the miners don't have payment. So that kind of like sets up collecting the guns and stuff. I thought that was really clever. I also just really love that like throughout the franchise, they're constantly stripping the guns away from Michael Gross.
Yeah.
And in this one, they do that for most of the movie. It's like, well, what are you going to do against these things? And by the end, they get this giant punt gun used for like hunting flocks of ducks. Giant gun. It looks like a comedic prop, and they blast one of them to hell. I thought that was really awesome.
Yeah.
And I like how they have to come up with different ways to kill him. They have a character who's a Native American that I really like his character, and he's standing next to like the statue that looks like him. He's like, oh, this is me. It's one of like the cigar store kind of Indian statues.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, this is me. They carved it after me. And the lady's just like, no, they didn't. I bought that. But it pays off. He's sitting there digging his flagpole. Well, later in the movie, the graboid eats the statue instead of him.
Yeah.
And he uses the hole in the ground that he was digging. He shoves a saw down there, and the graboid runs right into the saw and gets split in half. And
thank God for Kalijah.
Dude, I love it. I will say, the first maybe 20 minutes, I probably was with you where I'm like, who are these new characters? I don't care. This is the past. But I ended up loving these characters. I really did. I liked them. I liked the guy who kept losing his hat. I thought that was a funny, just recurring, running gag.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't really have many complaints about this one other than, budget, which is
right.
Always a complaint.
Well, that's why I like doing this with other people, because I love the fact that we can watch the same movie and have such different opinions about them. That's why I love doing this. I'm so open to it, and I'll go back and rewatch it and watch for some of the things. I will admit the saw kill is fucking awesome. Like that is super cool. But this, to me, it's just so slow, and that's what it is for me, man. It just really is.
No, I get it. There is that scene where they're stuck in that like barn or whatever for like half an hour, while the graboids are slowly pulling the floorboards away.
Yeah.
That would have been a really cool like 5-minute set piece. So I do get what you say by like, oh, it's a little slow, it's a little
drawn out.
I get that.
Yeah. Well, we've already talked about my number 2 a little bit, so let's go back to that one. Tremors 3, Back to Perfection, would be my number 2. And I feel the same way as you do. When I was younger, the minute I heard Ass Blaster, I think I checked out. As a kid, I'm like, oh, this is just stupid. But watching it now older, I love that they brought a lot of them, like we talked about, brought a lot of the characters back, used the same actors for them. I love the opening with Bert on the gun, just shooting all these shriekers that are coming. I absolutely love that. And I love how we're so many, I think it's 30 years, 20 years later, 10 years,
11 years.
11, yeah. And everybody's like, it's been 11 years, Bert. And he's still the one that's like, are you guys serious? You're not doing this? You're not going to help out here? So that's really cool. And obviously the introduction of the Ass Blasters is a lot of fun to see them actually come into action. When you see the one come around the fence and they're all just staring at it, wondering what it's doing. And then you see it blast into the air. Watching that now, I'm like, oh man, that was cool as hell. But a big part of this movie is they're not allowed to kill the graboids. the government comes in and they're like, these things are endangered species, so you can't kill them. So that's kind of one of the big hurdles we have throughout this movie is how can we save ourselves? Because they're trying to tear perfection down. They have this punk ass Melvin from part one is actually a real estate guy, and he's trying to tear down perfection. And the minute you see Melvin, you're like, this fucking kid, man. And one thing about this movie that's cool is they're doing these fake tours. Like they're taking people out doing graboid tours until a real graboid comes and eats the guy. I thought that was pretty cool too, to see that actually play out. So for me, number 2 is Back to Perfection, Tremors 3. Now, before we even started this list, and I want to say this, and I mean this with every genuine bone in my body, any guest, including my wife and I did the Child's Play franchise. We didn't know each other's rankings, my wife and I, until we started filming. I didn't know Steve's, but I had a feeling him and I were going to land at the same number 1. And since we haven't talked about it yet, I can tell you that our number 1s are Tremors. Let's hear your positives and negatives about this movie, my friend.
Well, unfortunately, I can only give you positives because this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it has a near perfect script. It's so efficient. It moves so quickly. It gives you everything you need and nothing more. Mm-hmm. Like, you love all the characters. They all stand out. And I love that it did A Quiet Place, 3 decades before A Quiet Place.
Yes.
They do so much stuff with sound. I love when the girl from Jurassic Park is on the pogo stick. And, just that build up the suspense. They keep finding different ways of showing the graboids without showing them. So the dirt, the shooting out of the ground, or in one of my favorite shots, when they're running in front of Chang's and the wooden,
the planks.
The planks are all like waving. Oh man. And
even the guy on the road, the construction worker, when he's working and he hits the graboid and it takes the jackhammer with it.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're showing it without showing it at all, which is awesome.
And I just love the such a slow build. Like you're getting to know the characters, kind of this small town. And then like slowly, like you're realizing like, something's wrong here. People are dying off. It's getting closer and closer. And there's some really great fun kills in the lead up. So often kind of those opening kills can be kind of throwaway. I'm thinking of, I just randomly thought of what's the 6th one, Cold Day in Hell.
Cold Day in Hell.
It opens up with like 3 characters getting killed, and you're just kind of like, who is that? That wasn't really memorable. Like nothing.
Why do I care?
Yeah, why do I care? And in this one, there's such a build up to every death. There's something cool about all of them. I love the couple with the radio in the car.
Yeah, the doc.
Yeah, and the graboid sucks the car down, and the headlights are shooting up into the night sky. Like,
where the fuck is the golden oldies coming from? I'm with you, man. One thing I can say about Tremors, and with the exception of fucking Melvin, who we got to remember is a young teenage boy, this is a movie that has a cast full of people you root for. And it's very hard, especially in the horror genre, to find a cast of all people that you root for. You don't want to see anybody die in this film. And even Melvin, he's a kid, so you can forgive him. But, Val and Earl are awesome. We were talking about Fred, when they're trying to leave town and they see old drunk Edgar up on the pole. So they rock, paper, scissors it out, go up there, and he died of thirst. You find out the doctor tells him thirst, which is 3 days. And at this point, they haven't seen the graboid. So they're, why the hell was he up there for 3 days? Then they see all the sheep that are slaughtered, and they see the hat on the ground, and Val bends down and picks the hat up, and old Fred's head is there. And he's just like, now what the hell is going on? And like, you're seeing all these deaths, but you're not seeing the deaths. You do see Fred get sucked into the ground, but that's all you see. You don't see the graboids tearing him apart. And I actually really love how they're going to ride the horses into town, and you see the graboids for the first time, the actual graboid, and the ground starts to rise. And they're like, there must be 1 million of them. Then it pops through, and he's like, nope, just one. And like, I love that scene, because the first time you see it, that is so powerful. And that's another one of those scenes that for me is cemented in my brain and cinematic history of seeing the graboid for the first time. And it's the perfect design.
Yeah.
It's not over the top. It doesn't look weak. It's the perfect look for me. And I love the end when Val has the idea to throw the bomb behind it to blow it up and make it move faster towards him. And then he jumps out of the way and it goes flying off the cliff, can you fly, you sucker? As it's going down and it just hits and explodes.
That's the cliff that he's peeing off of in the very
beginning.
Movie.
Yes.
So, I love that.
It's one of those things,
man. It's so smart.
This is one of those movies that, it just hit me, Stampede. They keep referencing the stuff from the beginning. And it's one of those things that one of the best, my three favorite scenes in this movie are the coming up through the ground, the graboid falling off, and Bert and Heather shooting the other one to death.
Oh, yeah.
Like that is such a fun, that basement scene is so much fun. And
that's such a good blend of like actual footage of actors with miniatures where like they have a little graboid puppet but they do it really well where it looks convincing.
Right. And one last thing I want to say about Tremors 1 is when this is just a little moment, but it's always made me laugh when they're sitting on the rock and Bert and Val just had a fight because Bert was like, why'd you drag us out here? And so now they're all kind of just cooling off. And this is where Bert delivers his line of, if it comes to starvation, I'm just going to walk out with one of these bombs and let the graboid take me and blow it up. And Earl's like, that's not a bad idea. And Val just gives off the best laugh at that point because he's like, they just had that fight. So he's like, they're not connecting the dots at this point. He just starts laughing like, yeah, go ahead and go out there and blow yourself up. And it's such a little moment, but every time we watch this movie, I laugh at that part. And it's something so subtle, but it works so well in the context of this movie.
Yeah. And I do want to give out a shout out to Fred Ward. I feel like we haven't really mentioned him much, but he is a huge part of the first two movies. And he does exactly what he needs to do. He plays off Kevin Bacon perfectly. They're such a good duo. So
I can't tell you how many times as a kid for no reason I'd just be like, pardon my French. This movie started pardon my French for me. So overall, I love the Tremors franchise. Even part 4, which I would consider the worst one in my opinion, is still a fun movie. I think it's the worst first act in all the movies. Like the whole first act to me is just so drawn out. There are fun moments in it, obviously, but the Tremors franchise is that franchise that has always been a B franchise, but has survived the test of time because what people don't remember is the first one bombed at the box office. And I believe the first one is the only one to get a box office release. I think if I'm not mistaken, that's the only one. And this movie has survived in the B movie realm and had 7 sequels and people are still watching them Shrieker Island just came out in 2020. That's how much people are still loving these movies. And I really hope that maybe they could do some type of mid prequel or something if they're going to do another one, because I can't imagine watching a new Tremors movie with a whole new cast. It's just something, I don't think this is something you can really reboot.
They did try to do that pilot for Sci-Fi with Kevin Bacon. I have no idea why that didn't get picked up. Like, it must have been atrocious if it didn't get picked up, because I don't understand.
Yeah. The following for Tremors alone, you have people who doesn't know Tremors. And to me, this is just the example of how something can be ahead of its time. Because like I said, when Tremors came out in the theater, it bombed. It was just an absolute failure. But the VHS sales on it alone made the studio pick up a sequel. And I think that is just incredible that this movie has really stood the test of time for this many years to where people are still talking about this franchise. So, Steve, don't go anywhere, man. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, make sure you're checking Steve's out. I got all his information down here. On Location, Christmas Slasher, Time's Up, all coming out in the next year or two. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of this gentleman here in the future. As always, guys, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, man. Thanks.